This is live.
Well, hello. There we are. Hey, Jeff.
Hey there.
I hope some people show up to this. This is only our second attempt at this. So anybody who shows up, I'm grateful for, and surprised that anybody can find us. But yeah, Jeff, so you and I have been talking about doing something like this for most of the time since we knew each other. I think pretty early.
Pretty much the first day we met, I'm pretty sure.
We were riding in the car, we were talking, and I think we both thought, man, we should have recorded this.
That definitely, I forgot about that. Like that had to be like at least the first day or two after I met you, because I met you at one of the deal makers breakfasts, and then you were like, hey, why don't you let me drive you around and show you some of the stuff we're working on? And I was like, all right, that sounds great.
Yeah. So today's conversation, for those people that show up, we're going to talk about mindset. We're going to talk about no bad days. I had something today that I'm going to let Jeff coach me through live here so that I don't have a bad day, because it's been a tough one. It's been challenging. My heart sank a little bit. Earlier this morning, about 9:30 Eastern, I got a call that a house was on fire. And anybody who's ever had that call, let me tell you, it is something that will sink your day. You immediately go to a dark place. You're worried about people that are in the house. You're worried about people that you care about, that, these are renters that have been there for years. And thank God, praise the Lord, everybody got out safe. But yeah, it's good. So Jeff, let's talk about that. We'll start there. How do you coach someone like me to have a good day? And obviously I'm really grateful that everybody got out safe. So that in and of itself is really good. And I can look to that and think that's a good thing, but I still probably lost $250,000 today. I don't have insurance on the house.
Ooh,
it's
brutal.
Not going to be good. And the house really burned down. I mean, it burned for an hour.
Yeah, that's next time get insurance. That'd be my starting on that. Little pro tip in the real estate world there. Listen, I mean, here's the thing. So what I always tell people is how you perceive the day is really how you receive the day. So like good and bad stuff happens to everyone every day. Somewhere in the world right now, someone's having the very best day of their life. Somewhere else in the world, someone's having the worst day of their life. It might be your tenants, right? Like it's bad for you to lose your money, but like they're losing their life, right?
They potentially lost everything that they own, right?
Yeah. And if they're anything like most of my tenants, like that kind of thing is completely and totally devastating, because probably almost everything they own is in their house. And so that person might be having the worst day of their life, right? Yeah. But the thing is, if you think about that logically, if one person's having the best day of their life and someone else is having the worst day of their life, then we know for sure that the day is objectively neither good nor bad, because it's the same day, right? It's just the person experiencing it, how they perceive it, that determines whether it's good or bad for that person. So once you recognize that, you can take responsibility for how you respond to the junk that happens. So the house burns down and you can choose to freak out about it and be sad about the money you lose, or you can choose to be happy that your tenants are okay. You can look at it and say, you know what, I'm really fortunate that this isn't going to cause me complete financial ruin. I have other assets. I have other things that I can do, and I'm going to survive. So those things really matter in that. But ultimately, it's about building a muscle, right? Like, when you buy a new car, all of a sudden it seems like everyone's got that car, and you just see them everywhere. That's right. The subconscious mind. Tony Robbins calls it the reticular activating system, but there's actually science behind this, right? There's this thing called the Bader-Meinhof effect, which essentially says your subconscious mind defaults to what's familiar. So the longer you focus on not having bad days, the easier this becomes. So like,
it's muscle memory at that point is what you're saying.
It's exactly what it is. And actually, there's this psychologist, brain psychologist, actually he's a PhD in like neuroscience, who wrote this book called Hardwiring Happiness. And he talked about how the more times that you fire the neurons down the pathways of happiness and joy and contentment, the easier it becomes to fire those pathways. And if you think about this, it makes sense. We all know that person who's never happy. Right?
Oh God, I hate those people that I call them Chicken Littles.
Yeah, they spend all their time worried about stuff. And when you worry about stuff all the time, you only see negative stuff. And when you only see negative stuff, you worry about more stuff. And pretty soon everything's wrong with the world and nothing's right.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, you can do the opposite. You can train your brain to see the positive. I interviewed this guy on my show, Last Life Ever, whose son died in a really bloody battle in Afghanistan. And we interviewed him on Memorial Day. His name was Mike Pearson, and he started this charity for wounded veterans after his son was passed away. And I talked to him about it, and I said, like, how did you, like, because I find this really inspiring when people go through trauma and then they go and do something like really, really positive from that. Like, I find that inspiring. Like, some of my favorite guests on my shows and the favorite people I've ever met are people that are out there doing those kinds of big things. Like when you guys went to Ukraine, I mean, that's amazing. Like
Yeah.
you hear about this thing and then you go do something about it. Most people aren't wired that way. So I really wanted to get to the bottom of how this guy whose son died was like, oh, I want to start a charity to help, veterans. Right. And what he said to me is it was really hard. But he decided early on in his grieving process that he had to find 3 positive things that came from his son's death. And so he went out and set about making those 3 things. And one of them was the charity. And I thought to myself, that's really smart. That's like next level no bad days. Like I always say, well, like good and bad stuff happens to everyone. And like, and we get to choose how we perceive the day. And it doesn't really matter, today with your house burning down, you could choose to say, you know what, it's really great because my tenants are okay. And, I'm going to be okay. And all this other stuff happened, but it could have been so much worse. Or you can choose to say, man, this is terrible. It's horrible. And the truth is, however you decide to look at it, that's how it is. And so it gives you this huge amount of control. And like, it's actually really freeing when you think about it. And those are terrible pictures, by the way. The place is trashed. It's dead.
The place is in bad shape. And you're exactly right. And I really am thankful that everybody, that's the first thing that you think about. Did everybody get out? And there was like 45 minutes there where we didn't know. We couldn't get anyone on the phone. And so you're just kind of, you're stressed out. My wife was stressed out. But as soon as we found out everybody was safe, luckily for me, I am wired that way. And that is the way I've experienced the day, is that I've said, hey, thank you, Lord, for protecting those people. I can rebuild a house.
Yeah.
But just let's love on them. Let's bless them. And so we'll set up some GoFundMe account or something like that to try to help them to recoup what they've lost. And they really lost more than me, because while I lost some money, they lost everything.
It's like the widow in the Bible that gives their last coin to the collection plate, right? Like that's a much more generous act than me giving $1,000 to something,
You're right. Yeah. That's exactly the way I see that. And
the other thing too to keep in mind is too, since we're on this sort of pseudo religious bent, like if you believe things happen for a reason and you trust that there's a plan for it, then you can look at the situation and say, I don't know what good is going to come of this, but I believe good will come from it.
Yeah. Hi, Kimberly. I saw you said that, we'll make lemonade out of the lemons we've got. I really appreciate that. That's very kind of you.
That's the strategy too, right? The making lemonade. That actually is what No Bad Days is about. It's like tons of bad stuff has happened to me in the last 26 years, but I refuse to have bad days. I just refuse.
I meant to apologize for that, Jeff. I only gave you credit for like 15 years when I was doing my short earlier, and you've got over a quarter of a century of this No Bad Day. And you just told me before we went live, you decided this at 17 years old.
17.
Talk to us about that, Jeff, because that's freaking amazing.
Well, I've talked about this in my book. So, I mean, if you just read my book, you'd know all about it, Robbie. I don't know.
I think I did read your book.
Did you read it?
Yeah.
It's not even out yet, so I don't know how you would have read it. But
you didn't give me a copy of it or something?
I might have emailed it to you. Yeah,
you emailed it to me.
All right, fair enough. All right, I give you permission to have read my book then. But, so the thing about it is, like, I didn't share this publicly actually very often. So it's a little awkward to say, but like I walked into a bathroom when I was 17 with a knife and I held it against my wrist. And I don't know that I was suicidal or not because, it's so long ago, it's hard to even imagine that sort of thing, but I was upset. I just broken up with my girlfriend who I thought I was going to marry. My parents were going through a divorce. I had all this teenage angst that you have when you're 17. And I thought the whole world was coming apart. And I sat there and I was looking in the mirror and I thought to myself, this is really dumb. Like, I'm relatively healthy. I'm young. I live in America. I have tons of opportunity. Like, I got to figure this out. And I threw the knife in the sink. Literally, I threw it in the sink and I said to myself, I'm going to make today a good day. Today is a good day. And I just said it out loud. And I said it like 10 times. And I walked out of the bathroom and I decided that every time I saw a mirror for the next month, I was going to say 10 times out loud, today's a good day. Unless I was in a crowd, then I would just think it, right? Because I didn't want to be a weirdo. And, this is 1994, 95, somewhere around there. And so like, this is pre like Tony Robbins YouTube. I mean, YouTube didn't even exist yet, right? So like I didn't know, but what I was really doing was a positive affirmation. Today's a good day. Today's a good day. And I just said that over and over again. And I did that for a couple of months. And I had a string of good days. And I walked into this 7-Eleven and the guy behind the counter says to me, how you doing today? And I go, I never have good days. And then I went, holy crap, I never have bad days. Like I was like, I just realized all of a sudden I never had bad days. Like I literally, like without realizing it, it had come from deep inside of me. When he asked me that, how are you doing today? I just said, I never have bad days. And I went, actually, I don't have bad days. It's been a couple of months since I had a bad day. And it's not like the first day after you decide is going to be a perfect day because you don't get perfect days, right? Some days are harder than others. Some days the house is going to burn down. Some days you're going to get diagnosed with leukemia like I did. Some days you're going to go bankrupt. There's going to be all this garbage that happens in your life. But if you take responsibility for it, and there's, Hal Elrod, who wrote The Miracle Morning, has a quote on this that I really love. And what he said was, the moment you take 100% responsibility for anything in your life is the moment you can change anything in your life. Wow. I mean, and I think this is super deep. Like if you think about it, it's like, it wasn't my fault that I got leukemia, right? But like, it was my responsibility to deal with that. Like if I don't deal with it, then I'm going to go curl up in the corner and die. Instead, I'm going to go find the best doctors because I'm going to analyze the situation I'm in and make the best possible decision given that scenario that I'm in. And by having this positive mindset of believing that things happen for a reason, of recognizing that we get to choose whether the day is good or bad. And that's really what it's about. It's about choosing, right? If it's how you perceive it, that matters. It's just about choosing it. So if you have that mindset, then when this trauma happens, you can look at it objectively and say, okay, like, how do I find the positive in this? Like what my friend Mike Pearson did when his son died. Like I had to find 3 positives. I just went like, when I got diagnosed with leukemia, I was like, something good's going to come of this. So now I just got to figure out how to get through today without having a bad day. And it was kind of dumb. Like my brother came into the hospital that night and he said, it was like 10 o'clock at night when I was diagnosed. It was like 11:30. He gets to the hospital and he said, I bet today's a bad day. It's almost like he wanted to prove that. Like I couldn't, I'd already been 13 years without bad days at that point. And he was like, almost like he wanted to prove it wasn't possible. And I was like, well, actually, I found out at 10 at night. Most of the day was pretty good. So it wasn't that hard, And then the next day, it was a little bit harder because that day I'm in the hospital all day and I'm thinking I'm dying. Like when I was first diagnosed, my white blood cell count was so high that everyone thought I was dying. The doctors thought I was dying. They didn't know what kind of leukemia I had, but they knew it was really bad, right? And turns out I was very fortunate in the type I had and it was treatable, but we didn't find that out for 3 more days. So I went through this period of about 3 or 4 days where I expected to live weeks. Right. Wow. Like, I mean, and that has a way to change your life. And that second day when I thought I was dying, I was wandering around in the halls, carrying my little IV pole around, and I was thinking about life and I was like, man, this day is really hard. This day's really hard. Like, but I'm like, you know what? I'm still alive. So I'm just going to try to be positive and I'm putting up a front, but I didn't feel it, and I went back into the hospital room and I sat down in the bed and this nurse came in and it had been shift change while I was walking around. And she looked at me and she said, oh my God, Jeff, I'm so sorry to see you here. And I looked at her and I go, oh my God, Shelly, I'm so happy to be here. And I think she thought I was insane. But the reality is this was like a babysitter of mine from when I was a little kid and I hadn't seen her in like a decade. And I was like so happy to see her that I thought it was all worth it. And you might say like, okay, on one hand, you have leukemia and are dying. And the other hand, you're seeing your childhood babysitter. You know, which one's more significant? But the thing is, at that moment, the one that was more significant to me was seeing this person that I loved as a child. Yeah. And recognizing that I had people that I cared about that cared about me. And that made that day good. And you know what? If I look back objectively, that's probably the best day of my life, because that's the day that I realized I didn't want to practice law. I didn't want to be a bankruptcy attorney. I wanted to get into real estate, which is something I always wanted to get into. But that's the day that I decided to make a whole bunch of changes in my life. And all of those changes have put me in a spot where I'm in a much better spot than I ever would have been if I hadn't been there that day.
So you made a decision to stop being a lawyer. Are you still a lawyer, by the way?
I am. I'm licensed in a couple of states. I mean, I don't practice law. I'm not giving legal advice, obviously, but I'm still licensed in a couple of states. Yeah.
Yeah. You decided to stop being an attorney. You had leukemia. And you're going to go become a real estate investor.
Yeah.
You had all the privilege in the world. You're just going to go and crush it in this new real estate game.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's worse than that, actually. So a couple of weeks before I was diagnosed with leukemia, one of the attorneys that worked for me quit, and I only had one attorney that worked for me. So I went from 2 attorneys to 0 overnight almost, because he quit. And then I got diagnosed and couldn't work for several months. And so I had this law firm that we did mostly bankruptcy work, and it costs about $4,000 to $5,000 a week to keep the doors open. And we had 0 revenue coming in. And I went from this is 2008. So like there was a ton of bankruptcy work. We were making really good money. And then we went to and we had the back of the phone book, like we were that guy, like $50,000 phone book ads and stuff like that. And all of a sudden, all the money went away. Didn't have any money coming in. And in fact, I had to hire people to cover hearings for me and stuff because I didn't have attorneys to cover the stuff we'd already been paid for. Yeah. And so I went from making really good money to like losing a lot of money really fast. And I dug myself in a giant hole. I had great credit at that time. So I ended up putting a lot of that stuff on credit cards. And I ended up with about $70,000 or $80,000 in credit card debt. Plus the phone book ad bills were still coming in. Plus, I had salaries to pay and stuff, and it just kept getting worse and worse. And in 2010, I was actually forced into personal bankruptcy because of all that. And so I was a bankruptcy attorney who filed bankruptcy. And I remember sitting there in front of the bankruptcy trustee and thinking, like, this is going to be a hard day. Like, how am I going to make this day good, right? And and I had drawn the worst trustee. I hope he's not watching your show. He's probably a giant fan, but I drew the worst trustee, the one I was scared of. As a bankruptcy attorney, I'm like, this is going to be the one that's going to be really tough. And I sat down, and they always start these hearings with, like state your name for the record and stuff like that. And this is so-and-so, and, this is the case number and all that. And he started to do his little recording, and then he stopped the recording and he looked at me and he said, Jeff, I want to tell you, I'm really sorry you're here today. And it made me feel so good because I was terrified of this guy, but I had worked with him for years. Right. And this is the first time I ever remember him like being like empathetic to any debtor, right? Any person.
He's human for the first time when you're there.
Yeah. And then I remember thinking, like this guy's actually a pretty good guy, and he is a good guy. Like I never had a problem with him, but I'd worked it up in my head that I was terrified of him. But that made that day good. And again, that's another one of those days. Like when I filed bankruptcy, I had no assets. I had $150,000 in student loans that didn't go away in bankruptcy.
Right.
And so that's when I started to invest in real estate. Of course, when you have no credit and $150,000 negative net worth, that's the perfect time to become a real estate investor. I took a job with a salary of $650 a week. And I got a few small bonuses, and I thought, I need to figure out a way to make sure that if I die, because I still wasn't sure I wasn't going to die, that my wife's okay. So I started doing like, how can I make sure that money will come in even if I'm not working? And real estate was the way to do it. It was the easiest, clearest path towards residual passive income that I could see. And so I just went all in on it.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit more in detail. I really love what you said is that was the perfect time to start being a real estate investor. And while you say it, is kind of in jest a little bit, it really was the perfect time. And it really could be the perfect time for anybody who's in that situation to start out. I have a very similar story. When I started out with no credit, absolutely no money, a negative net worth, and no job. So very similar. And I was just dumb enough to believe a guy named Carlton Sheets, who I saw on late night TV, that you could buy real estate without having any money. I never took his course. I never did anything. I
actually took his course, by the way.
I'm going to do it.
Yeah. I actually bought his course. It was 16 CDs. It came in a little folder envelope. CDs, like you played them on compact disc, right? And it was an audio course. And then there was a VHS tape that came with it that was called the Quick Start Guide. I wasn't super impressed. So congratulations on not spending the money. But it was highly motivating. And I loved it. I mean, really, like, I don't regret it at all, because like any kind of education, like watching a YouTube channel, listening to me talk or you talk, going to a conference, you don't really have to learn everything there is to learn. You just have to learn one tiny little thing, and it's worth it.
And if that one thing is to have the courage to start, that's really the best thing you'll ever do.
That's the most important thing, right?
I mean, honestly, I started with no knowledge, no ability, nothing. It was just I jumped in with both feet and started doing something that I had no business doing, and I learned it on the fly. I'm not saying that's for everybody, but that was my path. So
yeah, I mean, listen, that's how I did it too, for the most part. I mean, I had one friend who was a lawyer that had been that I'd went to law school with, that had been flipping houses, and had a small portfolio at the time, maybe 10, 12 houses. But I mean, these were Eastern Michigan, Detroit houses, right? And this is 2010. So these things were like $5,000-$10,000 max.
They were giving those houses away.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We bought some houses for under $1,000 back then. I mean, it was insanity. But so he had a small portfolio, and he was flipping houses and fixing them up and selling them to investors, at 8-10 cap, whatever. And I just said to him, I said, I'm going to save up a little money. And if you see something that we can buy for like under $20,000-$25,000, and we can each put in half the money, I want to do that. And that's what we did. And we wanted something nicer. That's why we picked a higher price point. I didn't want to buy a $5,000 house or $2,000 house. You
were buying something really nice.
Well, and we bought a condo that was a bank-owned foreclosure. The mortgage balance on it when they foreclosed on it in 2009 was like $100,000. We bought it for 25 or maybe 30,000. It wasn't a lot. It was less than 30,000. And we still own it. It's in a really nice suburb of Detroit. Probably worth $150,000-$200,000 now. And we bought it. We put in like, I think 15 or 16,000 each. And I'd save that up from work and bonuses and stuff like that. So
yeah. So Imran's asking, what advice would you give your 20-year-old self? And I think that's pertinent to this conversation. Right?
Yeah.
We're trying to convince people by the end of this call to do bigger things and get ready to be great, right?
Yeah, no. And so the answer is the same advice I give everyone, whether they're 20 or whether they're 50, it doesn't matter. Just don't wait. Like, if you're going to do something, just go do it. Even if it's not real estate, right? Like, if you want to write a book, start writing a book. If you want to be a real estate investor, start investing in real estate. Because the thing is, like, over time, these things they accumulate. Like, writing a book is a process. It takes a lot of time, but if you don't start, you never get there. And your first book might be terrible, right? Like, it might take you 5 books. So the sooner you start, the better. And the same thing with real estate. Like, if I'd started buying real estate when I was 18 years old, after I was, staying up late at night watching Carlton Sheets on infomercials when I was 14, 15 years old. Like, I knew I wanted to do real estate then, but I didn't do it. I went, I'm going to go to law school. And when I get out of law school, then I'm going to start making money. And then when I have more money, then I'm going to start investing in real estate. That's the wrong strategy. The right strategy is just do it.
Yeah, I like that. So I would tell myself to fight like hell to keep some more of the real estate. So I bought and sold a lot of real estate when I first started out, and didn't keep anything. So I basically became a real estate investor, created a job for myself.
Yeah.
Which I did love doing, and it was great. But I look back on, 2,000 or 3,000 houses that I bought and only kept 50 of them, right? Like had I just fought a little harder to keep 1 out of 5 or something.
Yeah, and that's what we.
That been.
I mean, that's actually what we were doing in the first few years. What we did is we had a strategy where we would flip 3 houses and keep 1. Like,
yeah, that's something that I tell people right now.
We'd flip 3, keep 1,
one, and that's a beautiful strategy.
Yeah.
Hey guys, hit the like button for us on this and share this with someone who would be interested in hearing this conversation. Maybe has been thinking about starting a company, becoming an entrepreneur or becoming a real estate investor. I think that they could learn something here about insight, about mindset, and just being ready to take the bull by the horns.
Yeah, and another thing too is like most people don't do this stuff because they're afraid, right? Yeah. Like that's the reality. It's the biggest factor that forces people into waiting is that they're afraid. And I have 2 thoughts on that. There's a quote from Richard Branson that says the difference between successful people and those who never succeed is that successful people take action without all the possible information.
Yeah.
I love that quote. Just don't do it. Like that's not don't do any research, but it's also like don't like try to know everything. Like you can learn as you go. Right. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is my own thought, which is if you don't feel fear, then you're not doing anything important. Like if you're constantly comfortable, then you're not going to feel afraid, but you're also not doing anything that matters.
Yeah, if
like,
you're not risking something, then you're really not doing anything.
Yeah. And I agree with Imran and here as well. Like you don't want to sweat the details too much, right? Like it's important to pay attention to details, but if you spend all of your time trying to get everything perfect, you never do anything.
Yeah, and I would tell you that when I was a 20-year-old person starting out at 25 years old, whatever it was, I was willing to do more then than I'm willing to do now to make things happen. And part of that was not sweating the details, maybe not knowing, but I took my own money and put it in people's bank accounts so that they could qualify for a loan to buy a house from me. I wouldn't do that anymore, right? Like
right. Yeah, and I mean you have to balance this stuff, right? Like if you know something's not appropriate, then don't do it, right? I mean, obviously, but the truth of the matter is, like, if you worry too much about details, you never get anything done. If you don't worry about them enough, you get destroyed, right? Like there's a balancing act there. Like you can't do things just to do them and hope that they work out. You've got to like at least know how to run your numbers, make sure your deals make sense, make sure you're following the laws, all that kind of stuff. Otherwise, you're in a much bigger problem.
What would be your approach if you're just starting out in Puerto Rico? From Kimberly Jackson. Well, I just started out in Puerto Rico about 5 years ago, and my approach was threefold. I came to buy single-family houses to fix up and sell. I came to buy small multifamily houses to fix up and rent. And I came also to buy some houses to just wholesale or flip really fast. So kind of like you were talking about, Jeff, at that point, we were trying to sell a couple and keep a couple. And it worked really, really well. So in Puerto Rico, you don't have the same amount of data that you get in the States. Like it's much easier to determine what something's going to sell for in Tennessee or Orlando than it is in Puerto Rico. But you can get the data by going and looking at lots and lots and lots of properties. And I came with the mindset to do more offers than I would have had to do back in Florida. And I offer on it. I've trained myself so that I don't walk through a piece of property without thinking about what price would I think this would be a good deal. Whether that's the Taj Mahal that I'm walking through or my neighbor's house, I walk through the house and I think, well, if I could buy this for X, I'm buying it, right? And then so that's what I would do in Puerto Rico is just start looking and making lots and lots and lots of offers.
Well, and you know what? The advice is the same, right? Like I mean, I haven't bought anything in Puerto Rico, but I agree. I mean, that's what I would do. I just start buying in Puerto Rico. Like it's the same advice that I would give my 20-year-old self. Just go do it and like figure it out as you go. And, make sure you're paying attention so you don't get burned, protect your backside, associate with people that are already doing it. Get the education you need and then go do it.
And Kimberly has. She's already bought some. She
I know.
Got here like a month or two ago. She's already bought a couple houses.
I think so, right? In Ponce area, if I remember correctly. So that's great. Yeah.
But we'll get you to buy something here soon.
We will. Well, I love Puerto Rico so much. I spend all kinds of time in Puerto Rico. And so that's the thing. I'm definitely going to have to. Oh, my friend Paul. Hey, Paul. So would you purchase in PR to Airbnb the property? I'm going to let you take this one, Robbie. What do you think? Airbnb, is it a good model in Puerto Rico?
Yeah, so it was not one of the models that we came to Puerto Rico with. It was not something I'd ever even thought about, really. I think we'd had one Airbnb back in Florida, and so we didn't have much success with that. So it wasn't really on the radar. But once we got to the island, some things started to fall into place that made it very clear that, yes, of course, you need to be buying things in Puerto Rico, especially when you can buy something at the right price point near the ocean and in a touristic area. God, it makes so much sense. Like, we've bought some apartments in Santurce that are magnificent, that cash flow for us in a crazy way, where we're in these things for like less than 70, 80 grand, right? And they're bringing in $4,000 or $5,000 a month. So that, of course, I'm going to buy those all day, every day, and I buy them in Tennessee or Puerto Rico or France. I don't really care. Give me an $80,000 investment that brings in $4,000 positive cash flow a month. Yeah, you got to buy that. And that's what Airbnb allows you to do. The same apartment might rent for $2,000 a month or $1,500 a month. Even the rents are kind of low here, so you can get a massive upgrade in your revenues by going on the Airbnb.
Yeah, I mean, the only things I think you have to be careful is if you're buying in a condo building or something, to make sure that they allow it, because there are quite a few places that do not allow Airbnb or short-term rentals.
So I'll give away a strategy that we've used here. We've bought some abandoned condos that were office condos and turned the whole place into hospitality. And just by changing the use, we take something that was abandoned, forgotten about, had very little value, so we buy it really, really well, and then we turn it into a hospitality use. Sometimes we're even getting Act 60 and 40% tax credits back on these things. But I'm a big believer in highest and best use. It's my favorite thing that I tell people is that, if you can change the use to something that it isn't now, you could pay 100% on what it's worth now if your use change is going to make it worth 10 times more.
Oh, you can actually overpay, right?
Exactly.
I mean, we did this on a deal a couple of years ago. We bought an apartment building above market, honestly. Like, it didn't appraise. We had to put more money down on it. But our whole plan was to convert it to condos and sell it. So we didn't care, right? We're paying $120,000 a unit in Chattanooga for this deal, but we're selling them for $250,000. So we don't care, right? Like we thought it was worth $100 a unit, but they wanted $125,000. So yeah. But if you're going to make $125,000 a piece, you still don't care, right? Like,
exactly. So someone asked the question, Mr. Boss asked the question, how does Airbnb compare to the Dominican Republic? I suspect it's similar. I don't have any point of reference for the Dominican Republic. I've been there only a couple of times, but I think that the tourism is kind of the same. Price points seem to be
so the main differences are probably the tax incentives, right? So like, you don't get the hospitality credits and stuff like that there. So I think there's some advantages to being in PR, but there's some advantages to being in DR too, because there's a lot of really cheap property there, and it's a beautiful island and stuff. So but like you, I've never done Airbnb there, so I couldn't really say.
Are you able to convince or shift the mindset of others around you to come among your real estate?
Oh yeah, no. So this is a question I think about a lot. So I think the question is, like, essentially, how do you convince other people to invest in real estate with you, right? Because real estate is a team sport. And the thing is, I used to be like that guy who would walk into a room and be like, you need to be investing in real estate. Like, you need to invest in real estate. And like, that doesn't work. Like, what you actually need to do is find the people that want to invest in real estate already and just are a little bit afraid to do it, and be like, hey, do this with me, right? Like, it's about selecting the right people, not about changing people's mind. So like, if you have a friend or a coworker or, a loved one of some sort, and you really want to help them like get into real estate, that's awesome. You might be able to convince that person's mind, but you need to have a lot of influence over somebody to convince them to change their mind. The real secret is to find the people that are predisposed to the stuff you want to do, and then offer them the things that they want.
Yeah. I would say that we encourage partnerships. We tell people at the Breakfast Club, we tell people on the YouTube channel that we like partnerships and that we like-minded people. So by inviting people to come to us, a lot of people will bring us deals. A lot of people will ask us how they can become involved with us. And we've partnered with, I mean, when you go to the Breakfast Club, Jeff, I mean, I can look around the room, and if we daisy chain it, it's everyone in the room. We're one person away, or a connection directly to that person. We've done a lot, and we obviously can't partner with everybody, and you have to do well at picking talented people to partner with. But because we invite and encourage partnerships, we get a lot of it. We get a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, but again, that's what you're saying is you're encouraging people that are predisposed to that to come do it with you. That's different than what I forget the person who asked the question, but what they were saying is, how do you convince people to do it? Tosh says, how do you convince or shift the mindset? That's really hard. But like, if you instead say, how do I find the people that already have the right mindset? It's a lot easier. That's what I'm saying. Now, that's not to say you can't convince people, because you can. Educating them, talking about it, people will like get excited, right? Like you watch Carlton Sheets once, it doesn't solve the problem for you, but you see that infomercial over and over again. You see him sitting by the pool in Florida, drinking a martini or whatever he was doing, and he's got all these people wandering around talking about how great their life is. That will help convince somebody eventually, right? But it's not going to always do it.
Yeah, and I think a big part of this conversation that we're having, it's not that we're trying to convince people to come and invest with us, but we are trying to let people know that if they shift their mindset, life can get better. And I think it's important to point out that if you don't shift your mindset, and if you don't have the right relationship with money, and you allow yourself to have these bad days and think like we talked about earlier, the Chicken Littles of the world, where they're just always seemingly having bad days. If they can have a mind shift change, life can get better for them, and really they do have control over that. So
yeah, I mean, it isn't easy, right? But it is a choice, and that's the thing. And it's no different than choosing to change careers, quit your job, go to college. Once you make the choice, it becomes a lot easier, because now you have a path, right?
Yeah.
Like you can say, hey, I'm going to go and become a real estate investor. And then you can go, okay, now what do real estate investors do? And then you can start to figure it out. But if you're like, oh, I don't know what I want to do, you're never getting there. So like there is that choice element. And there's a thing about decision. What I really find interesting about decision is, and this is why I take a little bit of issue to the idea of trying to convince people to do something, is that when you make a decision to do one thing, it comes from the root decisive, right? Or it's the same word as incision. Right? So like it's about cutting. So if you choose to be a real estate investor, it cuts off other possible paths. If you choose to move to Puerto Rico, you can't live in Antarctica, right? Like you just can't do both. Like once you choose something, you're cutting off all these other possibilities. And so what we have to recognize as real estate investors is not everyone chooses to be a full-time real estate person. Some people just want to like take some of their extra money and invest it alongside of you. Some people don't want to be in real estate at all. They just want to be in stocks and bonds. I think that's crazy, but that's because I've chosen this life, right? Other people might be really good at cryptocurrency. I'm not good at cryptocurrency. I might dabble in it, but I'm not great at it.
Yeah. I've been encouraging people recently to relook at what you're told, because I think the messaging out there in the world is to stay away from real estate and diversify your portfolio by, staying at your W-2 job, the worst kind of income you can get, putting the money away into a 401k or an IRA, which is all tax deference stuff. But eventually Uncle Sam gets that money, where if you can make that mind shift change and you do become a real estate investor and make that a significant part of your investment portfolio, that's what the wealthy people have done for years and years, hundreds of years. That's what works. That's where there are tax benefits. I mean, there are really a long list of great reasons to invest in real estate. I am trying to convince people to look at it, to take another look at it. Well, just to not believe what they're told. Stop being cheap. Take a little bit of control. I like what you said. You have the control, or you have the ability to decide for yourself, and that's what we encourage on this channel. By the way, give us a like, guys, for us. We're trying to
on that decide thing too. That's really important, because if you might say, well, I don't know what I want to do, but that's a decision also, right? You're deciding not to do it then. So like one thing people often forget is that inaction is a decision as well. And so it's really important. Like if you want to change your future, you have to do something different than what you're doing now. You just have to. Now, it might be real estate's not the right thing for you. I mean, like I said, it might be that you want to be a movie star. Well, then, real estate's not the path to become a movie star. I get that, right? Unless you're Robbie, and then, you're everywhere and you're on YouTube and probably next week on a TV show. Who knows?
Well, I think for part of what you're saying, if you are deciding to be a movie star, you might need to move to Hollywood, or you might need to go to where they're making the movies, right? If you want to be a movie star and you're in Iowa, it's going to be a tough road to hoe.
Yeah, but it is a mindset thing. Like Arnold Schwarzenegger's autobiography is one of my favorite books of all time. Most people think that's crazy. I think it's the best real estate book ever written. Like, I really do. I think Total Recall by Arnold Schwarzenegger is the best real estate book.
All right.
How's that for controversy? Right. So here's the thing about Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's a mindset book even more than it's a real estate book. Right. So Arnold is a 14-year-old kid. He's growing up in Austria. He doesn't speak English. He sees on a magazine cover a guy that's muscular and has a hot blonde on his arm. And he asks his friend and says, who is that? And his friend says, that's Mr. Universe. And Arnold says, I will be Mr. Universe. Like, that's what he says. He doesn't say, like, how do you become it or whatever. He just declares he's going to be Mr. Universe. And then 3 years later, he's the youngest Mr. Universe in history, right? He goes on to win the thing like 7 or 8 times. But his whole career is made up of this, right? Like, it's this, I'm going to do this. I'm not going to give myself any other option. It's the only option. He declared before he was a movie star that he was going to be the first American movie star to make, to make $1 million for a single movie. Yeah, you definitely did dress Hollywood today.
You guys like that? Yeah. This is one of my. I bought 2 new shirts the other day for $10 a piece. So I'm really happy with this purchase.
Yeah, $10. It's amazing. but the point I was going to make is the thing that I find fascinating about Arnold is he made his money in real estate. Like, he became a millionaire from real estate before he was a movie star.
Right.
And it was because he wanted to be a movie star that he became a millionaire in real estate. He moved to Hollywood and he started buying apartment buildings in Hollywood.
No kidding. Yeah. And then that is the way millionaires are made, though. Millionaires are made.
Yeah. No, I mean, he made lots of money from, marrying in the Kennedy family and connections.
That doesn't hurt.
Being a governor and writing books and all that other stuff. But at the end of the day, no matter what happened, he was going to be fine because he had those apartments in West Hollywood.
Amazing. Amazing. He's got a great story. So how do we discuss with people one of the things that we talked about is being able to do bigger deals? I think that's pushing yourself to do bigger deals. So I think we're now talking to people who are real estate investors, and lots of the people that I see that are making the comments I know are already real estate investors. So what is it that what's the messaging there that we want to put forward?
Well, it's actually very similar to the other messaging, right? Which is just start doing it, right? Like, if you have a passion to buy apartment buildings or hotels or commercial buildings of some sort, you just got to start going and doing that thing, right? So for me, bigger deals are a little trickier. There's more risk points. It might be, moving. I know some people that are like, oh, I don't want to do this because I don't want to bring on partners, or I'm afraid of raising capital because syndications are scary. And all those things are true. Like, getting a new partner is like a new marriage. It can go very badly if you don't pick the right person. A syndication, raising money, if it's not done correctly, can cause lots of legal troubles for you, right? So there's definitely true that there's risk points. But again, when we were talking earlier about if you don't have fear, right, then you're not doing important and big things. You're just doing the stuff in your comfort zone. You're not growing anymore. Those are fear points, right? It's not that those aren't legitimate concerns, because they are. It's also a legitimate concern to look both ways before crossing the street, but that doesn't mean you stay on one side of the street forever, right?
Right.
You can be afraid of getting hit by a car and still be like, I'm going to look out for a car, right? And then cross the street anyway. And that's how you have to do this stuff. So, like, for me, if you want to buy an apartment building, start looking at apartment buildings and start talking to people that are buying apartment buildings, and then start figuring out how that works and what it looks like and what you need to do it. It's no different than buying that first, single family house. It's the same concept. You just got to go figure out how to do it. Yeah,
I think that's a great point, and start hanging around the people that are doing it, right? If you hang around 5 people who own apartment complexes, you'll probably be the 6th person who owns apartment complexes.
And also following back on that Arnold Schwarzenegger thing, just believe you're going to do it. Like I had this social worker that I was doing a little consulting with, and we were talking about different things, and he was pointing out some area that I was trying to work on personally, and he was like, the problem is you don't believe that you're going to make this progress. When I hear you talk about, and this is before I owned any apartments, he said, when I hear you talk about your real estate business, and when you talk about how you're going to be an apartment investor, I don't ever hear you say, I think I might someday want to invest in apartments. You say, I'm going to go buy apartment buildings. So
Right.
You want to fix whatever, just say, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go do it.
Speak it
and
into
once you
existence.
don't give yourself, it's like burning the bridges, right? Like
Yeah.
if you burn the boat, you're not going backward.
Yeah. That's a great point. I think that's something in my investment past. It has been, we make fast decisions, and then once we've made a decision, we work our ass off until it comes to fruition.
All right, figure out how to do it.
Yeah, and you burn the bridge. You burn the bridge. You sink the boats. You give yourself no choice. I like to tell people what I'm going to do before I start doing it, which I think is exactly your point. I can remember one time that I wanted to buy a brand new Hummer, and I started telling people I'm going to buy the Hummer, and a few months later I had the Hummer. Or
that's what I did about moving. That's what I did about Puerto Rico too, yeah. Right? Like I started a YouTube channel where I said I'm moving to Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
Like I hadn't looked at a place in Puerto Rico, I hadn't moved to Puerto Rico. I just said, hey, guess what, everyone? I'm moving to Puerto Rico, right? Because I knew if I start telling people I'm moving to Puerto Rico, I'm going to end up in Puerto Rico, and I don't regret it at all because it's a fantastic place.
Well, and you're going to even regret it less. I mean, once we get to doing a couple of deals here, I can tell you 5 years in, I'm a little ahead of you. It's the best decision we've ever made. So
yeah, well, I think it's
far and away the greatest business decision and life decision. I mean, life's gotten really good.
It feels like they took 2010 Detroit, threw it on a tropical paradise. That's what it feels like to me. It feels like I can show up and I can find all kinds of great deals, and then I can go scuba diving.
Yeah, yeah. I can go deep sea fishing in the morning. I can buy an apartment complex in the evening, and I can turn it into a hotel next month.
Yeah, and get a tax credit for doing it.
Get a tax credit.
It's actually unreal. Puerto Rico is a fantastic place. It's an amazing and entertaining place to spend time. I don't technically live in Puerto Rico. I've shared this, with a lot of people. I don't, because of my real estate investing, I don't pay tax. So I have no incentive to go and get an Act 60 and try to, evade taxes. I have very low tax burden as is. And I spend less than half my time in Puerto Rico. But I literally have to peel myself away. If I didn't have business stuff to do here, and I'm in Tennessee right now, I would be in Puerto Rico today. I mean, I was there last week. I did not want to leave.
Yeah.
I mean, I love being there. It's fascinating. I meet amazing people doing amazing things. There's tons of opportunity. The weather's amazing. It's like hands down the best place that I've ever spent a significant amount of time in.
Well, and if you start buying and doing your business here, then you can stay here more, Jeff.
I know. I'm
not trying to convince you, but I'm trying.
You don't have to convince me. I'm already on board with this. I'm telling you, 2023 is the year of Puerto Rico for Jeff Holst.
All right, great. That's great. I saw Kimberly had a different question that we never had.
See, this is called declaring it while you're looking for that, right? Like I'm declaring it in advance. That 2023, I'm in Puerto Rico.
Kimberly's pointing out in her quote here, or in her statement here, that DR, you need a passport. It's very saturated. Puerto Rico is better. No passport. U.S. dollar. United States government. It is in that regard.
Oh, I agree with all that.
Really, really a beautiful blend of everything, and I believe Puerto Rico is the jewel of the Caribbean. Everything that you need. It's amazing.
Yeah, so my friend Harry Dent actually convinced me about Puerto Rico. One day I was talking to him. We met up at the Caribe Hilton, and we were sitting there, at the bar just having a chat. And I asked him why he was in Puerto Rico, right? And he's a best-selling author, and he's lived in Puerto Rico for I don't know 8-9 years now. And he said, well, two things. He said, one, the place I live would be, and this is a few years ago now, so he said it would have been like $5,000 a square foot in South Beach, the same place, same view, right?
Wow.
And it's a tenth the price in San Juan, right?
Yeah.
That was number one. And number two, it's this is his quote, the only first world city in the Caribbean. It's the only place in the Caribbean where you can go to Costco, Sam's Club, IKEA, English language movie, and still be in the Caribbean.
Yeah.
And also, like where I live, or where you lived until recently, I don't know where you live now because you just moved, but like I can be in the airport in 6 minutes.
Yeah.
Right. It's a $4 Uber ride to the airport, and in 4 hours I can be back in Chattanooga.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's unreal. I mean, I'm in the same time zone. I don't have to deal with like jet lag. I mean, I can literally. In fact, on Friday, I was walking around Old San Juan. I took a picture of myself on Fortaleza. And that night, I took a picture of myself in the rain in Chattanooga. And people were like, I thought you were in San Juan today. And I was like, I am. At 2 p.m, I was in Old San Juan. And tonight, I'm in Chattanooga. You know, it's great. It's crazy that you can do it. And it makes it a place where it's really possible to commute.
Yeah. So I think we're going to wrap it up. If there are some more questions that people want to ask us, we would love to chat a little bit longer. But you want to tell us, Jeff, where we can find you and social medias? You've got a few things out there. And
sure. Yeah. So, I mean, listen, I spend a lot of time on, so a couple of things. One, I have my own Puerto Rico YouTube channel, Puerto Rico Life, which I'm going to get you on one of these days. We're going to do an interview and get you to talk about Puerto Rico and why you like it. It's not real estate centric, right? It's just about like cool stuff to do in Puerto Rico. And so I love that channel. That's been a lot of fun. So you can follow me there. But Instagram is far and away the easiest way to get my attention. I respond regularly to people who send me messages on there, and it's just Jeffrey Holst, my name, at Jeffrey Holst on Instagram. But I also have a Last Life Ever Facebook group, and Last Life Ever is it's sort of my non-gangster version of YOLO. It's just about living the best version of your life, whatever that means to you. And so for me, that's giving up bad days. The book, No Bad Days. Yep. And so it's giving up bad days. It's choosing to live in Puerto Rico. It's choosing to do things like, I've been to 5 continents this year. I've been to Africa twice, Europe twice, Antarctica, South America. All this year, I took a sailboat, for crying out loud, on our friend Todd and Krista's boat. We sailed down to St. Martin from San Juan. I mean, just an amazing things that I've been able to do because of real estate, but also because I just choose to live fully and authentically into the things that I think are fun and interesting and good, frankly.
Yep. And anybody who wants to get that book, you're going to launch it in April, I think. So make sure you get us a link, and we'll promote it.
I sent the pre-order link to your guy earlier, and but I mean, if you just go to No Bad Days on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Target, it doesn't matter. No Bad Days, Jeffrey Holst, you'll find it. It comes out end of April, so it's a little bit early right now, but it is done, and I just reread it, and I'm super happy with how it turned out. So.
That's good. It's good to like the book you write. I think that's an important thing, right? You
don't
want to finish the book and then read it and go, I didn't get my point.
Well, and I was actually afraid of that because I wrote it a little while ago, and then I was like, I've been having all these things changing in my life. I'm moving and all this stuff, and I'm like, whoa, I wonder how this book held up. But the thing is, it's a window in time. It's my life story told as a series of life lessons that kind of teach you how to move from wherever you are to find your purpose in life, and also to figure out a way to find positive in all the garbage that we all experience.
Yeah, that's awesome. I look forward to helping you sell a bunch of them. So hey, so before we go. I think we should talk about what's going to happen next year in 2023. What are your thoughts? I know Harvey Dent, your friend, he's been saying for years what's going to happen. Right.
Yeah.
But I think there's going to be some opportunity around this upcoming recession that we're going to have What are your thoughts on that? And let's talk about that for a few minutes.
Well, so there's a lot of conflicting data, right? So like, I follow a couple of different economists. I mean, Harry certainly has been predicting a recession for, I don't know, 100 years or something. I mean, he will be right eventually, and probably in 2023, he will be right about that. He thinks it's going to be really, really bad. Other people think it's going to be less bad. Harry's a cycle guy, right? So he's looking at these long-term cycles. And my only criticism of his stuff would be that like COVID has messed up the cycles, right? Like there's all this money and printing and all this inflation and all this stimulus money that's still out there. And there's still a lot of money on the sidelines. And we're seeing that with things like hiring, job levels, unemployment levels are still really good. Yeah. So there's an argument that we could have a pretty mild recession, but they're going to continue to raise interest rates until inflation tames itself. And if they keep raising interest rates long enough, it will cause a recession. That's what always happens when you raise interest rates. It's designed to do that. Interest rates take money from the economy. If you take money from the economy and you pay it to the government's coffers, that's like increasing taxes. It's the same concept. It's a drag on the economy. If you do enough of it, it kills the economy. That's what they're trying to do because they want to bring inflation under control. And they know they can bring inflation under control, which is really, inflation is a sign of an overheated economy. It means there's more demand than there is supply. And so stuff's going up in price. So if you can reduce demand by raising interest rates and making it more expensive, right? And at the same time, you can do some constrictive monetary policy like they're doing right now. You're going to start to slow the economy down. It's going to cause a recession. It's really a question of how bad it's going to be. I personally think they'll immediately start lowering rates once the recession hits. So I think we'll see 12 to 18 months of sluggish economy. I don't think it's going to be really bad. And then I think we'll see a significant rebound going into 2025. And that lines up, by the way, with Harry's predictions of the cycles. He's always said sometime around, he said 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, but he's always said around 2025, the economic cycles converge in a very, very positive way. And I think those are still underlying growth trends going into 2025. So I think, short-term pain for a lot of positive. And to Don's question, how do you dominate 2023? The same way you dominate any market. And I have I'm going to leave you with the greatest piece of wisdom I possibly can, Rob. You ready for this?
I'm on pins and needles.
Very, very, very easy to time the real estate market. People think it's hard to time the real estate market, but it's not. I have a foolproof way. It works every single time. And that is buy whenever you buy, sell when it's high.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing. Real estate trends up over time because of inflation, because the underlying components go up, because they're not making more land, all of that stuff, because population growth, right? So over time, real estate trends up. So if you bought in 2006 and you had short-term debt or you didn't cash flow or something and you had to sell in 2008, 9, 10, you got crushed. But if you bought in 2006 in any market, almost anywhere in the US, anywhere in Puerto Rico, and you sold today, you're fine.
You're killing it. You're not just fine.
You made a ton of money, right? So it's not about timing the market on the buy, it's timing it on the sell. So all you do is buy stuff that works now. So in 2023, if it cash flows, if you're putting debt on it, you better have long-term debt. You don't want a balloon payment in a recession. That's bad. You don't want to have to refinance in a recession. You don't want to have to sell in a recession. So long-term debt that cash flows, and have adequate cash reserves so that you can weather the storm if you have a turnover or something like that. And then just wait. There's a saying, right? Don't wait to buy real estate, just buy real estate and wait. That's really good. That is really the strategy. Like just get started as soon as possible. So you want to crush it in 2023, buy deals that cash flow and hold on to them.
I think that's always good advice when you're in a down economy. Anytime you can start any business in a down economy, have it be successful by cash flowing real estate, it's successful.
Yeah.
You get to ride up the wave that's inevitable, right?
Yeah, if it works.
That economy is always followed by a good economy every time.
Yeah, if it works when the economy's shitty, it's going to work really well when it's good.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly right. Well, I think that was great. And we're right at an hour. What a fun conversation. we'll do this again. Love to do this on your Puerto Rico thing. We'll just talk more about Puerto Rico. Thank you all for coming out and watching us and bringing us the questions. Decide to have no bad days. Get the book when it comes out in April, and you can get it from us. We've got a link that you can pre-order it on, and we'll make sure that once Jeff does put it out there that we'll have ways for you to get it. So, yeah.
Thanks so much for having me. I really enjoyed it. Have an amazing day.
All right, guys. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming, and we'll see you next week.